Okay, so you've written one or more poems, but now you're ready to self-publish them or get them onto the market some way. But how exactly are you going to do that? Well, stick around because we're going to go exactly through the steps you're going to need to know in order to make the right decisions for your poems. This is Chris Baird from selfpublishingmadeeasynow.com, where self-publishing doesn't have to be so hard. So we're going to look deeply at how to self-publish a poetry book, an ultimate guide. So what to consider when self-publishing poetry books? The first thing you need to know is do it yourself or hire a professional. That's a question that must be answered. And there's some advantages and disadvantages. If you hire a professional, you're going to pay a lot more money up front before you even know whether or not this is even going to work. You have to keep in mind when getting starting with poetry that it's difficult getting books to sell on poetry. It's just the way things are. But if you build an audience and do the steps that I'm telling you how to go about this, you're going to drastically increase the chances that your book is in fact going to sell when it gets out there. And so if you choose the do-it-yourself route, which I would always recommend, you're going to learn how to do the formatting and finding all of the different people and the freelancers who are going to put this entire project together and help you get the best possible thing and give you the maximum flexibility, control, and highest royalties out of it. But if you choose to hire a professional, you want to make sure that it's a highly ranked professional. I would recommend going with something like Fiverr or Upwork in order to find the professional service that you're looking for to help you with the majority of the steps necessary to get your book, your poems put together into a book and onto the market. So you really have to figure out which one is actually working for you. And based upon the complexity of the project, the amount of time you have, your own personal technical abilities, these are all going to impact this critical decision of whether you should hire a professional to do the whole thing or whether you should learn how to do it yourself. Number 2, preparing your manuscript. So you're going to need to make sure that it's edited and proofread. The most important thing you can do is to ensure that the quality of the writing and everything is looking great. If it isn't, it's already going to be an uphill battle getting the sales on the book of poems. And so this poetry book of yours, you're going to need to really focus on making sure that the quality is there, making sure that the manuscript itself is properly formatted and structured according to what the industry standards would be. The easiest way to figuring this is looking at the best sellers of this type of poetry book that you're considering putting on the market. You may consider a professional editor and also using beta readers, which is why building an email list can be really helpful in this process. Number 3, how many poems should you include? Well, the answer is it depends. The easiest way I would tell you is let's look at books that are already selling, poetry books that are already selling, that are in the top 100,000 books on Amazon. That's the basic sales rank, their rank order. And if they're in the top 100,000, they are selling at least one copy a day. So whatever they're doing is probably not too far off. But a couple of things to remember is you don't just want to put a bunch of garbage poems into your book to make it a certain length, like 100 pages or 50 pages or whatever it might be. But at the same time, we needed this book to be actually 24 pages, 25 pages in length so that we can make a paperback version of the book. That is incredibly important. So don't think about just leaving an ebook version. So it needs to at least be of 24 pages. If you can get it to something like 85, 87, now we can do a hardback version of the book, which I also would recommend if it's possible. But quality matters more than quantity, and therefore you don't just want to throw any old poem into it. We want to build an audience. If they don't like the book, they're not going to buy your future books, and so it doesn't matter how many pages and how many formats you have. Number 4, choosing a trim size. Now, the standard rule is, again, back to looking at the best sellers in your genre for poetry books and seeing exactly the length they're going for. But I can already answer this one. It's going to be 6x9. That maximizes the total distribution, that you're getting your book out to as many different distribution channels as humanly possible. Also, when you do the hardback and these other versions, it's easy to just get it right onto the 6x9. You don't have to do any additional work. So that's the reason why I would always recommend 6x9 whenever in doubt. But of course, you can do other types of trim sizes if you really need to. But if you do that, you're going to decrease your distribution. And one of the keys to winning the self-publishing game is maximum distribution. Number 5, poetry justification. So when you're figuring out how your margins and all of these things should look, again, I would look and see what is your competition doing? What exactly does your ideal reader expect when they're going to be reading your poetry book. Is everything like exactly centered left? Usually not. Sometimes it can be in the middle, or they can do justification where the far left and the far right are perfectly smooth, but then it's in the middle. It's not going to look like a standard book. Poetry just doesn't work that way. So based upon the lines and things you have, you may even have graphics in there that you're going to have around the sides, which is one of the reasons with my formatting, I use Jutoh to do the formatting so that I'm able to get exactly the correct spacing. Whether you have graphics and images to go along with your poetry, it just makes the whole process a lot simpler. So you really need to figure out what's going to work for you. What usually will work for the bestsellers will also work for you. Number 6, styling poem titles and poem text. So we want to make sure that the style is exactly right in terms of large caps on the first letters, the exact fonts that you're using. Again, we're looking to see what are the best sellers doing. We also want to choose a font that's easy to use. And that's one of the reasons in my Book Formatting Made Easy course, I go through exactly that I like to use Georgia, and I tell you the size, and I have the template that shows you exactly how to best use this tool in order to ensure that your book is getting formatted correctly, so that whether it's the ebook, the paperback, or the hardback book, all of these are going to be perfectly formatted and ready to be published on Amazon without having any errors or mistakes or Amazon warning you about quality issues. That can be eliminated with using the correct formatting on all of this. But you can also, of course, choose other professionals to go through the process and figure out which styles will be best for your book. So, number 7, designing your book cover. This one is one of the most important because if they don't like the book cover, they're not going to click. If they don't click, they're not going to buy. So I would look at the top selling books. In addition, I might choose to pivot a little bit and choose something that's very creative. It needs to be very clear on that cover that this is a book of poems and not just some random title that doesn't make it clear what the value proposition is. We want the person to click seeing that this is a book of poems. If they see it's a book of poems and don't click, that's fine. They weren't interested in the first place. And when designing your cover, you can do it inexpensively if you choose to do it like on Canva or something, but I wouldn't recommend that. I would rather recommend going to Fiverr. You can find my cover designer below in the comments, my affiliate link for her, and she will do a fantastic cover for your book of poems. You figure out sort of what you think the cover should look like, and she'll figure out the rest for you. Around $25, very affordable for your cover, assuming we just want the basic ebook cover and we can do the rest of the cover formatting ourselves. Number 8, submitting to a book designer. This is another one of those ways where you're able to hire professionals in order to help you with the whole process. Now, it is a bit more expensive, and you have to be really clear of what you want. And you have to remember, if you make changes in the future, you're going to end up paying them more money, which is one of the main reasons why I highly recommend learning the steps yourself to get your book formatted on the market and selling without having to go through these additional expense loops that you're going to find. You'll need one change here, and then a week later you have to make another change, and they're hitting you at, who knows, $50, $100 a change. It can be very, very expensive. You're also going to want to find somebody that you can communicate effectively with to make sure they don't misunderstand what exactly you're trying to accomplish with your book of poetry, and they're going to be able to do it. So, where to publish poetry? Now, this is a really interesting one. The first thing is publishing in journals and magazines. You don't have to do it with a book, a self-published book. You can find journals and magazines that are already publishing poetry and simply tell them, hey, I want to put my poems out onto the market, and I've got these amazing poems. And you have to just keep on following up, figuring out what their guidelines are, and also figuring out how big their audience is, and then making sure that you're being persistent and staying in the game long enough to give yourself a chance to actually win at this publishing game. Number 2, self-publishing on a website or newsletter. This one is really powerful because you're able to give out this free poetry and helping building up that audience. You should choose the right platform because there's a lot of different platforms you can use for this. This is a bit complicated, but now we're starting to get a little bit closer to using content marketing for your specific book, which is an important way of finding your audience and making sure that when they already are familiar with your poems, when you come out with your poetry book, they're able to click and make the purchase. Number 2, self-publishing on we already hit that, self-publishing on a website or newsletter. Number 3, self-publishing a collection. Now, this one is almost completely necessary, which is we want the book to reach 25 pages, ideally around 87. So what you're going to do is you're going to put lots of poems together. But you need to plan the content. Don't just throw random poems in different whatever styles together. That's going to end up with a result that looks all hodgepodge, just thrown together at the last second. You do not want to do that, and people will punish you by not purchasing future books or doing returns on the books they purchase from you. Edit and revise. Back again to this thing, we want to make sure there's no mistakes on that collection, making sure that the formatting looks very similar as we're moving through the process. Design the layout. And one of the keys with designing the layout is to make sure that it's consistent. So we can have different sections for our poems, but making sure that the flow of the poems fits together smoothly. It's not just random poems thrown together in all willy-nilly fashion, right? You see what I'm saying? You want to make sure that your book of poems, it really flows nice and smoothly, and that the style itself in the book is a very consistent style. So, why to self-publish a poetry book? To share or to sell? And this is one you're going to have to consider, because one of them is, it's number one, self-publishing poetry to share. You want to share it with the world. You want to get this thing out on the market. So you just figure out a platform where you're able to actually just get it to share. Like, I think Wattpad is a great place to do that. There's a number of other forums you'll find on the internet where you can put it out there. We're not trying to make money. We're just trying to hopefully build an audience. We're just going to be able to format it and put the thing out there. The downside is there's less control if we do it this way. And that means that almost anybody could do this route, and it will end up with, sometimes your book can be out, your poetries can be out there with a lot of poetry books that are a lot lower quality than yours. And you may need to promote your work in order for this strategy. This is a long-term strategy, but it can be very effective in building your audience. Number two, self-publishing poetry to sell. So if you're trying to get it to sell, then the fact is you're going to need to focus on big, strong platforms like Amazon, KDP, Ingram Spark, maybe Lulu, depending upon the length of your book. You're going to need to run ads against your book, and you're going to need to price your book, your poetry book, competitively to make sure that people are able to, when they see the price on it, it's not too high and not too low, so you're able to make enough money that you can afford to run ads against the book. But at the same time, you want to make sure it's not too high that people will just discredit it based on that. And you want to leverage the book marketing tactics on this whole thing, where we're actually using all of the advanced Jedi Ninja tactics that I teach on this channel to get this book of yours to sell. And especially since poetry is a tough genre to write in. Okay, hope that makes sense. So, self-publishing poetry for the sharers and the sellers. So in other words, we're doing it for both. But in order to do that, you need to make sure it's on a platform where you're actually making money. But at the same time, you can do it in ways in which they can either donate or whatever it might be in order to get this book. And you should be focusing on quality. That's a very important aspect. In addition, you should use visual elements with what you're doing with your poetry. There's no reason you shouldn't have illustrations and the illustrations that go with the poems that you're writing. Just no reason at all. And like normal, you're going to have to promote your work, either using content marketing, which I have a content marketing course made easy below, you'll find in the description, or through paid ads, which I tell exactly step by step my group coaching and one-on-one clients exactly how to go about running ads for your book. And I walk you through exactly the precise steps that you're going to need in order to succeed at that. So, final words. There's a lot of things to consider. You notice I did a deep dive today looking specifically at your poetry books. And what are you going to do with these poems you've been collecting, you've been writing over the years? Let's put them together and let's put them onto the market. I would not recommend sharing all of your poems. Keep some of the better ones and give them out in exchange for an email. You can also then take your existing books and you can give them away for free to people in exchange for an honest review for the people, assuming you're building an email list. The hardest part of this entire process is building an audience who are looking forward to your next poetry book and will make the purchase. You can use all sorts of social media, and you can use content marketing on TikTok and a lot of these things in order to connect with your audience. And when they connect with you, when you have that personal connection, they're going to buy from you. And they're going to read your books, be excited, help you with reviews, and find new readers for you. So there's so many things that get covered when it comes down to this. My question for you is, how far have you come in your poetry book? How many pages is it so far if we put together the different poems that you've done? And also, have you published this on any particular platform? Because I want to know down in the comments where exactly you're at in the process. And check up above me here for more video answers to your self-publishing questions. Thanks.